Well, I've been coming to this place quite a lot. It's now 16 years, I think. And people have been asking me throughout this meeting, do I see any hope? Well, yes, I do. Part of it is that it is this extraordinary gathering that takes place every year. And I don't know if you understand how much moral support you give us when we come here and talk in front of you. We're often quite beleaguered out there. I've been looking at elephants for about 54 years now, and the other reason I have great hope is the quality of the people that I work with. And I'm going to introduce them to you, and they will speak to you. So Bernard Lesirin is Bernard has been a Samburu warrior. He's a self-starter, someone who halfway through working for us said he wanted to go to university, and did, and we supported it, and he raised the first tranche of money to pay for that. He's an extraordinary ambassador for wildlife. If any of you come out or have been, you will meet him and see in the bush how well he speaks. He's a guide at Elephant Watch Camp, great communicator, and he has eyes like a hawk. Now, Lucy King once again was born in Africa. She is a real scientist. She's also a bit of a Pied Piper. You wouldn't believe the number of interns and young academics who flock to her standard and work with her in Savo. Again, a great communicator, a kind friend, and an academic with an astonishing record of awards for her work on bees. Finally, Frank. Frank was working on the oceans of the world for the Times of London as their correspondent. Luckily for us, he evolved and grew legs and came out onto dry land. He's also a writer, written some gripping books about the ocean. He's a wonderful son-in-law and a father to my grandchildren, husband to my daughter. He's a great leader. He rallies all the people who work for Save the Elephants. And we've got a wonderful cast of people now. We're employing about 45 people, I believe, between our different field stations. Frank is also a new voice to conservation. And finally, he's a fabulous pilot. So, Frank, I hand over to you now. These are the torch carriers for Save the Elephants.
Well, thank you, Ian, for that. I have to say, pre-evolution, when I was thinking about joining Save the Elephants, working for my father-in-law seemed like a very bad idea. And I have to say, I think it was the best decision I ever made. Ian is, what you see is what you get. The sort of empathy that you can feel from him on stage is what he is, not only for members of the team, but also to all those who support elephants and also to the elephants themselves. So, Ian, thank you for all you are and all you've done. And thank you to all of you. It always feels a bit like a family occasion coming back to WCN, seeing all the other conservationists and and the wonderful WCN team that's growing and getting more powerful by the year, but also to reconnect with all of you. It's really, it's a fantastic thing to be able to look out here and see so many faces that we've worked with in the field and have supported us over the years, and to see all the new faces and the enthusiasm. And as everyone has said, it means a great deal to all of us to have your support. We couldn't do it without you financially, but I think we'd have a time to do it without you morally as well. To have your support is a huge boost. We're gonna do a little bit of a fast-paced talk here to keep you on your feet this afternoon, because we don't want to do a long monologue. So we're going to chop between 4 different speakers to give you 4 different lights on what we're up to. I'm going to start and just give you a little glimpse of elephants and why they're special, and then talk to you a bit about the work we're doing to conserve them. First off, how many of you have actually met a wild elephant? Okay. And how many have not? Okay, great. Well, look, I'm preaching to the converted then, because all of you who have know that there's a difference to meeting an elephant to meeting most other animals, in fact. And every animal has its own flavor when you meet it. But when you meet a wild elephant for the first time, there's this overwhelming sense that here is a deep consciousness. It's a very hard thing to prove, but it's a very easy thing to sense when you spend time and you look into an elephant's eye and you spend time with that. And I think that kind of transformative feeling is an extraordinary thing, because you look at these creatures, they could hardly be more different from us. In fact, you can't really get more different as a mammal than an elephant is to a human. But we're very similar in many ways. We both live in these intensely social family structures. We live for about the same amount of time. We have children at, I did have a clicker somewhere. We have children at about the same stage in life. And those children take about as long as ours do to mature. They require a huge amount of input to their lives. So we're enormously lucky to be able to work with these creatures, and we have and to try and open a window onto their world. And opening this window through the sort of research that Ian started doing back in the 60s and that Save the Elephants continues to do now is really at the heart of our work, because once we open a window onto their world, we can start to understand how to conserve them. And we can also build compassion for them, because the more we understand their world, the more we can communicate about that world, the more people can share in their wonder. And we can communicate the kind of the sentiments that you feel when you're close to them. So on our team, this is David Dabalan, who's appeared here before at WCN. He's at the heart of our long-term monitoring team. For 20 years, we've been monitoring the individual lives of these elephants, getting to know them as individuals, and then being able to, by knowing them as individuals, we start to build up a picture of their society. This is possible in Samburu, and in Samburu we have won the battle against poaching for the time being. As part of a collaborative effort in northern Kenya, we've turned the tide, and really elephants don't get killed for their ivory anymore in northern Kenya. But that's not the case elsewhere on the continent, and I'm sure all of you have heard about the continental crisis caused by the ivory trade. Well, that crisis continues in many parts of the elephant range. So in 2013, with the Wildlife Conservation Network, we set up this Elephant Crisis Fund. It was a very WCN model. We would be the strategic lead on the ground in Africa, and WCN would administer the funds and do all the governance and lead and share the governance weight equally on our monthly allocation calls. 4 years on, I think we've got a lot to say for ourselves, and more than I can tell you now. And we've got reports out front, but I'm going to give you a little skim over each of the areas. The fund invests in anti-poaching, anti-trafficking, and demand reduction. And on the anti-poaching front, a couple of years ago, we told the story of a crisis that had blown up in Garamba National Park in the north of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Garamba is one of the most iconic national parks in Africa. It's also one of the most besieged. It's preyed on by the Janjaweed from South Sudan, the ADF from Northern Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Lord's Resistance Army from the West. And the Lord's Resistance Army has flared up again recently since the US Special Forces pulled out of the hunt for them. About a year ago, we had to fly into action with the Elephant Crisis Fund to give them a replacement for their helicopter, which was downed by belt-fed machine gun fire. And we got them a replacement. We hired them a replacement. The park, there's an amazing article just come out in GQ this week, detailing that in a more recent incident where the warden got shot. He survived. But 13 rangers have been lost in Garamba over the last 3 years. They I think, it's an enormous challenge, and it still is, I think, on the edge. But they have turned the tide. Whether the tide comes back in again, we don't know. But last year, Garamba managed to halve the amount of poaching that they'd had. And this is through an approach that we've been funding with the Elephant Crisis Fund, which is based on the concept of intelligence-led anti-poaching. So instead of just trying to cover the ground with anti-poaching forces, we need to have smart deployment of rangers, because we don't have the resources to protect, to cover the landscape with rangers. We need to direct those rangers through informer networks, through community intelligence, through elephant positions, the tracking systems that Ian was talking about earlier, and also through community support. So with this intelligence-led approach to anti-poaching, we've managed to turn around the situation, or rather, African Parks, our partner there, have managed to turn around the poaching with support from us. This is one of the forest elephants that live in Garamba. Garamba is one of only 2 places in Africa that forest elephants and savanna elephants hybridize. So you get them both there. But you can see he's a very magnificent looking, but different looking from the savanna elephants, his straight vampire tusks and his red eyes. We're not only concerned with the big iconic populations with the Elephant Crisis Fund, it's also critical that we support those seed populations, those outlying populations that are at the edge of the range, and yet they're right on the edge of viability, some of these. This is Mali, up in the northwest of the continent. Save the Elephants was tracking elephants there back in the early 2000s. We found that they had the largest range of any elephants in Africa. I think 48,000 square kilometers. A few years ago, there were only 300 elephants left. And in 2016, a third of those were lost in a single year due to an Islamicist insurgency that swept through the country. And the traditional respect that the Tuareg had was not enough to protect them. Well, the Mali Elephant Project has been supported by the ECF and has been apparently successful in at least slowing this slaughter, and they have not found any evidence of poaching in the last year. Doesn't mean it's not happened, but they've not found any. So success is also on the fringes. On the anti-trafficking side of things, we face huge problems, mainly because of corruption. Corruption is this cancer at the center of the continent, but it can be combated. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by finding pockets of integrity within each of these countries, and then supporting those pockets of integrity and creating vetted units that can operate within that country with support from NGOs, and those vetted units can then hold the prosecution process on track. And these are some rangers from that are engaged in anti-poaching in Nubali and Doki with the Wildlife Conservation Society, who's another great partner of the ECF. As Louis was saying earlier, the prosecution process is another critical element of this, because too often the prosecutors aren't trained to take these cases to fruition. And we need to go beyond arrests to getting people in prison. And we also need to target not the guys that handle ivory. Those are easy to catch. We need to go up the chain to the senior traffickers who are actually making the money. And these guys are hard to catch, and you need the sort of tools used by the big Western law enforcement agencies, the sort of financial analytics to trace the money wherever it goes, and then sometimes even drag these guys out from Africa and prosecute them here in the States. Because too often, these networks are not just involved in ivory, they're also involved in drugs, and that brings them into the remit of prosecution under different laws, which is an advantage. And then, of course, we've got demand. Demand for ivory is the most serious. If we can fix the demand for ivory, then we don't need to do either the anti-poaching or the anti-trafficking. But it's a long battle. As Ian said, we've got China turned 180 degrees from where it was 4 years ago. It's an incredible turnaround. That's the government. There still exists a demand for ivory within the population, and that's a threat, because if the ban is put in place without turning the hearts and minds of the Chinese population, then you could end up just driving the trade underground. And what's happening at the moment is we're seeing the trade squeeze out to the borders of China. So Hong Kong, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Laos. And this is a casino in the Golden Triangle in Laos called King's Roman. And it's a cesspit, for the want of a better word, of gambling, prostitution, drugs, and illegal wildlife trade. And it's very popular with a certain type of overseas of Chinese tourists that's going in there. And we sent Lucy Vine and Esmond Bradley Martin there to go and do a report, and they published this report. Esmond is, I'm sorry to say, no longer with us. He was murdered in his home in Nairobi in February. We don't think it's related to this, although it's not completely clear. On the positive side, earlier this week, the US government declared the owner of this King's Roman casino a kingpin of the transnational crime. Yeah, the US Treasury said that she was a kingpin of the US of transnational crime, and that is an enormous assistance in bringing international pressure to bear on Laos to shut down places like this, and we're funding work to do just that. Now, I'm going to have to rattle through this. This is. Hold on. I'm just going to restart that. Just to give you a flavor of what you do, some of you may have seen this movie before, but we need to change those minds in China. And in order to do that, we work with groups such as Wild Aid to create materials that we can show in cinemas. And this is Li Bingbing, who's an ambassador for elephants, who works with Wild Aid and has come to see us in Samburu. And this is the kind of thing that we're showing in cinemas around China. Thank you. I won't go into this. This is just a summary of the projects that we've created through the Elephant Crisis Fund. Just like to draw your attention to that logo at the top right. That is symbolizes the very strong collaboration between Save the elephants in the center, and the Wildlife Conservation Network, which is the ring around us all. And that's what's made this possible, is that alliance. Now, I just want to skim quickly over. I'm going to be very quick because I'm far over time and Lucy's going to kill me. But one of the things that we're using, as Ian said, is tracking. And here's an elephant called Chuck Yeager checking out some of our tracking, our museum of tracking collars. And there's Lucy in action in putting a collar on at a recent mission in Savo, where she managed to lead a team in putting 20 collars onto elephants in 4.5 days. Which I think is something of a record. It's pretty extraordinary. And this is what it takes to do a job like that. A helicopter in the background, the most beautiful plane in the world. This is a new plane that the generous people of the United States, and one generous person in particular, made happen. And it's changed everything for us. There's a Super Cub that also works, and then we've got one vehicle missing, but three ground vehicles. It's an expensive job. It costs us about $10,000 to track an elephant, to fit an elephant collar and track it for 3 years and do all the appropriate analysis. But it's absolutely critical, as I'm beyond securing elephants against poachers. And I'm going to hope to tell you that. One of the things we do with them is shepherd elephants. So by looking at where certain signal elephants are in the landscape, we can send patrols out to follow them and make sure they're okay. And each of these elephants, we've got about 50 elephants in the north, and each of them represents a number of other elephants, and we go and check up on that regularly. This is the landscape that Bernard comes from and where we work, and this data streamed through to the Regional Security Center based on LEWA, guides the rangers of the Northern Rangelands Trust and KWS and others to protect these elephants when they wander into dangerous areas. The app that Ian was talking about has been extraordinary, and the benefits of tracking elephant for security have spread. So if you look at, that's Ian's first collar back in 1969. By 2013, this is how many collars there were, and 2013 is when we went on to this new tracking system. And you can see there, here we've got a big spread. And now this is important because these collars don't just help protect elephants against poachers. They help plan landscapes. This is Samburu, where we work, the Matthews Range, the dark area up there. You see our research camp in there. You see the sort of foothills of Mount Kenya down here at the bottom. If you look at it in a different, well, here's, this landscape is open at the moment. There's no fences, there's 2 reserves in the middle of it, but it's an open landscape. It's not going to stay that way. That is the new tarmacked Cape to Cairo road that's going north-south. That's fine, it's not a problem at the moment. Elephants and other animals can walk across it, although roadkill is becoming a problem. This is an east to west highway, part of this great Africa land bridge that's now coming. So this is a new, envisaged as a rail, road, and oil pipeline. We have to put crossing points across this road to make sure that it's not invaded. This is a different representation of that same landscape. It's a network theory analysis of all the elephant movements that we've got for that landscape. And you can see the sort of, the network analysis has picked out an arterial connectivity across this landscape that we've been using as part of a suite of things to decide where the connections should be. Now, we identified 4 collars between these reserves here in the middle, Samburu, Buffalo Springs, and Shubba, going across this road. We need to start protecting these roads now, these connectivity now, to protect future-proof against future infrastructure that's going in there. How do we do that? We do that with the community, and these are the Mama Tembos. Now, you may have heard of the Mama Simbas, created by Shivani Bala of Iwaso Lions. Well, Shivani kindly let us follow in her footsteps to create the Mama Tembos, and these ladies protect corridors. They march the corridors every day, they record who's using them and how often, and then tell us about any infrastructure they see going in there. Now, I'm going to bring Bernard up here, and Bernard is going to tell us a little bit about how the community can help in other ways, other than guarding the corridors, because we all know that we can apply technological tools and analyses across these landscapes, but without the support of the people that live with elephants, we're never going to win this battle. We have to have the support, And Bernard is one of the leading interfaces between animals and people in Samburu. So without saying more, Bernard, thanks.
Can you hear me? Yes. Wow. Lions, leopards, elephants don't make me this nervous, but you do. Well, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you all for coming today. And this is my second time to the States, and I'm loving it. It's wonderful, and thank you to Wildlife Conservation Network for making this possible, and for you too. I come from Samburu, which is in the northern parts of Kenya. That is where I grew up. It's a wonderful place to be, fantastic landscape, extremely beautiful. Simply, it is breathtaking. I would actually say it is magical. But also, it is wild and unforgiving. I have tons of stories that I could tell you about growing up in this beautiful landscape, but then you will have to spend here, because you might not be comfortable. Talking about stories, especially stories around the fire, or sometimes out in the open under the blanket of darkness and millions of stars. The stories that stuck with me growing up as a young herds boy are stories that revolve around wildlife, especially fascinating stories about elephants and why elephants are special to us. I remember following the warriors, and we'll go to faraway places, away from our villages, for weeks, months, trekking, these arduous journeys, following the rains with our cattle. And that was the very first time that I learned that elephants were nomadic as well. Elephants are part of the Samburu culture. They've shared the same land for centuries, sharing the same resources, lived side by side. We have a mutual respect between us, and this mutual respect has existed for many, many years. I work as a guide and also as a host on our conservation-based safaris, which is Elephant Watch Camp. But here I am in the United States. I'm able to step into both worlds. So I'm an interface, as Frank just said. I introduce visitors to our world, to the world of Samburu, the magical Samburu, the wildlife, the elephants. But also, I take insights back to my own people, back in Kenya, back in my village. And that is very important because I learn a lot here that I would like to share with my people. But things are changing really fast. The traditional way of life is under siege. And the nomads, like the Samburus, are caught in a perfect storm. But we don't have to be helpless victims of fate. For centuries, we have celebrated elephants, lions, and other wildlife as noble companions whom we share the land with. We have the capabilities to springboard off our vast reservoirs of traditional knowledge. Animals and wildlife have always been part of our tradition. And this runs deep within our culture, and this has to be kept alive. To be able to do this, we need to boost one key thing: education. That is what is going to give us the options and the flexibilities that we're going to need. I am so proud of what we've been able to do at Elephant Watch and Save the Elephants to bring about this change. Our scholarship team, not only do they teach environmental modules in schools, in the local schools around the reserve and wide, but also they run a highly focused elephant scholarship program. Bright, needy kids are sent to the best schools. They're given training opportunities that are beneficial to them. They're taught about work skills. During holidays, they're taken out on game drives to have a very close, intimate encounters with elephants, which build on their education. I am proud to say 120 lives have been transformed. And this is possible because of people like you. I know that in this room, there are quite a lot of people who've been to Elephant Watch and have supported in this. And I just want you to know that you've changed lives forever. Among the 120 transformed lives is my sister. She's on her 5th year on her way to being a vet. Well, I'm a bit envious. She's a doctor, I'm not. but I'm proud of her. We live in a time of great change. But education allows us to adapt with new skills and also staying true to the values of respect for the wildlife that we hold so dear. After all, we are Samburu and are very proud of it. Before I exit the stage, I would like to extend an official invitation to visit Elephant Watch Camp, to visit Samburu, so we could take you close to these elephants that we love and will be able to share their stories with you. Thank you.
Wow, well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Bernard. He's come such a long way from our tents in Samburu, as we all have, to this amazing stage. I just wanted to say I'm Lucy King. I am so happy to be here. I once came 10 years ago with Ian and helped him out at one of the WCNs, but I haven't been back since. So I'm so happy to be with our friends. Likewise, I recognize many friendly faces. Although we're thousands of miles away, I know a lot of you are supporting us, sharing our Facebook messages, sharing our stories, and it really is a friendly family here. So thank you for the greeting. I finished my master's and PhD with Ian up in Samburu and spent 5 years in one of his green tents up there on the edge of the Owasso River. And we've had a real interest, both of us, in this idea of elephant cognition, and what can we learn about elephants and understand about elephants. And I've been interested, and I'm now in charge of the Human-Elephant Coexistence Program for Save the Elephants, which is a fantastic program. It covers everything, everything that Ian and Frank are talking about, and Bernard, of course. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the challenges that are ahead, where humans and elephants have to live together. And this is just a brief but quite powerful series of maps showing us the population of the cities in Africa since the 1950s. You can see that Cairo was a huge center back then. And as you see, as we go into the 1970s, these centers of human population expansion really start to take hold. Right up to the 1990s, these cities are really starting to grow. And 2010, not so long ago, you can see Nairobi really becoming a hub, a massive hub, and West Africa an even larger hub. And this is the prediction for 2025, which is a few short years away. Now, the significance of these maps is the fact that in amongst these enormous exploding cities of development, infrastructure, technology, are these megafauna species that we all care so much about. Elephants being the one that we're focused on, but of course there are many, many special biodiversity species on this continent. So how do we do this? How do we live together with elephants? Some of them are 7 tons. This is like 3 times the weight of my Land Rover. So these are huge animals. How are we going to live together in this kind of mosaic and landscape? Well, this is basically how most people live with elephants. This is the reality of most farmers who are scraping a living off a few acres of land. You can see the 2 elephants in these pictures. It's actually quite rare to get photos in the daytime. Most elephant crop raiding occurs at night. So when we get photos in the day, it helps us understand what's happening. We do have a lot of camera traps out trying to understand elephant crop raiding behavior. But this is a very traumatic experience for people who have small-scale farms. And this is what I work on. How do we reduce this conflict at the very grassroots level? These are the people that live with elephants every single day. Well, this is one option, and this is popping up all over Africa now. This is a double-layered fence. The back one is a really strong game fence with a sort of chicken wire, meshed wire all the way along the bottom. Nothing can get through that. No warthogs, nothing else at all. It's got electric fencing along the top, and in front of it is a waist-high, we call these hedgehog fences, and they are spokes sticking out. The whole thing is electrified. I can't even tell you how expensive that is, but it's a lot of dollars per meter to build something like this. So this is happening. We are watching this with interest as these pop up, particularly around private reserves, and we're seeing this all over South Africa, and we're seeing this starting in Kenya. Well, the few places they've tried it in Kenya, our elephants didn't like it at all. They think this is a terrible idea. You suddenly put a fence across a migration corridor that they've used for dozens of years. This is a bull just going, we're not sure about this, and just walks straight through it. No question he was electrified, but it probably wasn't that much of a shock. And literally the next day, he just brings his friends. He's like, wow, I've got a gap now. So you can see 2 of our collared elephants in that group. And this is also valuable for our tracking data, where these breakthroughs happen. Why are elephants suddenly in a community that was protected by an electric fence? And of course, now they're all inside the community. How do you get them out? There's now an electric fence keeping 17 elephants inside the villages. So you've got to be very careful about sticking up electric fences. You've got to be absolutely sure they're going to work and that you're going to maintain them and that they're actually going to have an effect. And you need massive budgets. So unless you're prepared to do all those things, and some people are coming up with new ideas for electric fences. It's like, we can challenge the elephants. We know better than elephants. And this is one example of a new style of electric fence that they also didn't think much of. So I kind of feel so proud for our species when I see that. It's like, yeah, they're so clever. And this is going to be a big challenge. How are we going to live this huge exploding human population? We've got to learn and listen. And one of the places we can learn from is Asia. The Asian population of elephants is shrinking rapidly, partly due to massive habitat fragmentation. There are such small pockets left now of forested areas where elephants can live in harmony. And this is an exaggerated photo just to illustrate the issue that elephants are now coming through communities and farms. People are clashing with them on a daily basis. And it's not just communities that are building up, it's roads coming through, it's railways, and these horrific scenes we're seeing almost weekly coming out of Asia. And this is tragic, particularly for a highly endangered species. So we need to learn from that in Africa. We can't just go down the path and expect this to be okay with us. So this comes to my project. I only have a few minutes to tell you about 13 years of research with Ian, but it comes back to this extraordinary idea of bees. And I don't know how many of you know about this fact, but it turns out the Samburu and the pastoralists in northern Kenya have known about this for centuries. They seem to know that elephants, when foraging on trees, will stay away from trees which have bees in them. So as they forage, it's quite likely that the beehives that are naturally in these trees are being broken open, and the bees are flying out and stinging the elephants in the face. Now, it will only take one time for elephants to remember that tree is really lethal. So the next time they approach that tree or another tree with a beehive in, they can smell the bees, they can smell the honey, they can hear the bees, and they stay away from that tree. Now, we learnt about this as a folklore story, and I spent most of my master's and PhD time working on this behavioral interaction. And the only way to study this, how do you study two species that are highly dangerous, that if you put together could potentially kill you while you're observing them, but also the theory is that they never interact. So what we did was we took the sound of bees and put it through a wireless speaker and played this back to elephants. I'm going to show you just a few little clips. So we hid the bee sound off to the left in the bushes, and we filmed from a distance. And as you hear the bee sound coming out, the elephants react really quite strongly. There's a very large bull in the middle under the tree there. And this is very, very important for our behavioral research. How do they actually respond to bees? This is in the middle of the day. They were quite happy under that nice tree, and they run very fast in the opposite direction. In this case, we hid the bee speaker off to the right-hand side and filmed from where we are now. And there's, again, another bull elephant right in the middle. These are very quick reactions. You can just hear the bee sound. Slightly slower reaction. You can now see how the elephants respond. So the heads go up, the ears go out. They're turning their heads. They're trying to listen. Where is that sound coming from? They're flicking their trunks, trying to smell. One of them just kicks the young one underneath and says, get up, there's a problem. And then one female triggers this retreat, and she's not happy at all, and the others start to follow. The matriarch's at the back, and she's got her head high, she's clearly agitated. And now this is the key part of the behavior. As they turn away, they start to run, flicking their tails, kicking dust up. This is not what you see in response to an electric fence. They think there are bees coming after them. So this is an entirely natural thing that's happening in the field. This has been going on for millennia. The elephants have learned about bees. They don't want to go anywhere near them. Now what happens is an African bee is particularly aggressive. If they get stung by one bee, it releases a puff of pheromone that triggers the other bees to attack the same site. So it's not one bee that they're scared about, it's actually 10,000 bees coming to the same site. And of course, the young ones are particularly vulnerable. So the females might be worried about their faces, but a young calf could potentially be stung through the skin. It's much thinner. So they've learned, we've got to protect our calves, we've got to stay away from that sound, that smell. Well, actually, how can we adapt this? So this is what I spent many years developing. It looks really simple. In fact, it is really simple. It's called a beehive fence. And it's the simplest thing in the world, actually. It's just a series of beehives hung around the outside of small farms with a beehive hung between two posts. We're using a comifera post which regrows. So these trees regrow and create little trees around the farm as well. So that creates gums and resins and shade for the future. But the beehives are hung on wire, and they're interlinked one to the other all the way around the beehive fence. And you'll actually see a small piece of plywood there, which is painted yellow. That's what we call a dummy hive. So it means that we're tricking the elephants that there are more beehives than they think. So for 1 acre, we only need 15 hives. 1 acre is 12 hives, and we use about 15 hives for 1.25 acres. That's about the right size of a farm. If an elephant tries to push through between the hive and the dummy, it causes the whole line to swing. And then, of course, the bees are released or shaken. They make that bee sound, and the elephants are out of there. So it has never once been broken in the daytime. Most crop parading happens at night. I would say 99% of crop parades happen at night. And over the years, we've shown that's 80% effective at nighttime, which is much higher than we thought it was going to be, and really quite happy. So here's a bull elephant, just an example of one of our camera traps, approaching a beehive fence and just stopping dead. And he just basically went like this, and just back. We can see the footprints the next morning. We spend a lot of time tracking elephants on foot. Ian mentioned we have teams of interns and students coming. It's fantastic. And they're out there for hours tracking elephants, checking the hives, helping us collect data every day. And we have collared elephants now, which have been collared. They come into the farms, and we can also track their foot, how they moved around the beehive fence. We're learning a great deal through our collared crop parading elephants. We have amazing stories, too many to tell, but some of our farmers are so passionate about this project, and the honey that's being produced from these beehive fences are supporting women like Charity, who are putting her daughter through school and paying for household issues around the farm. This is, to my belief, the only elephant fence that's been invented that constantly makes people money. It doesn't cost money. So you're getting an income from the fence, and it doesn't take up any land. So it's a real advantage. And this honey is beautiful. I don't know how many people have tested it. It's highly sought after. It's absolutely organic. We haven't got any crop spraying going on in our area. And it's really quite beautiful. We call it elephant-friendly honey. And we're always being asked to bring it to America, but I think we can get 1 or 2 jars in our bag, but we can't bring boxes of it. But the idea is that it is elephant-friendly, so it's people and elephants now living in harmony together. We're not cutting off the elephant corridors. We know elephants need to come in these areas and forage, but just not in the 1.25 acres that we're protecting for each farmer. Of course, now it's all about what crops do you plant. If you've got bees around your farm, maybe you want some bee-pollinating crops that can boost your yield. Watermelons have to have honeybees to have any sort of red center. And we're looking at sunflowers now as an alternative crop for boosting honey production, but also it's a crop we're discovering is not being fed on by elephants. So we're looking at these non-palatable crops that farmers can grow that they also benefit the farmer, but the elephants are not so interested in, which is great. And Paul up on the left up there is our herbalist. He's teaching us which of the plants are not only good for bee fodder, elephants don't like them, and they're medicinal for the community. So somewhere in there is this triage of like the magic plants that we can use for these crops. And just a last picture really to show you our Elephants and Bees Research Center. We have teams of people coming to help us. It's a very simple camp. And we have amazing interns coming, and lots of them progress through a system, a lot are supported by WCN. We really love having these young people from Nairobi University, all the universities around Kenya, international students, there's a few here today, and it's really part of this movement to get young people coming on board. And I know this is not the last idea. Somewhere out there is another idea that's going to reduce conflict between elephants and bees, and we're hoping to build a toolbox of ideas, so not just bees, what else is out there? We need multiple methods to live with elephants moving forward. So this is just a quick graph to show you how we've expanded back from 2002, and we're really absolutely rapidly growing. The beehive fences, we've put all our manuals free online, and people can download them. And we're having beehive fences built in 15 countries at the moment, 11 in Africa, 4 in Asia. The data's haphazard, anecdotal, but it's coming in and it sounds positive. And these are with new elephants, new bees, and we're publishing papers as we can to try and prove that the science is working as well. So please go on our website, www.elephantsandbees.com. We are under Save the Elephants, but we have so much to talk about. We have our own website as well. Follow us on Facebook and come and visit us in Savo. There's lots to see. So thank you all so much for your support. It's been fantastic.